Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the event. Just so everyone knows who's speaking, my name is Michael. I work here at the People's History Museum. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a balding 40-something male with a beard. I'm wearing a stripy blue and green polo neck t-shirt with a red collar, blue jeans and yellow trainers. And just on behalf of everyone who works at the museum and who's been involved in Nothing About Us Without Us for the past few years, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Over here. Is that better? Thank you. I'll just go through the running order and do a bit of housekeeping, then I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Anis to introduce the event today. So first up today, we're very lucky to have two in conversation events today. We've got Martin Pagel, who's sitting here on the stage already. We're in conversation with Dennis Queen, who's ready to come on. And that's going to start now and run for about 45 minutes. There's a set of questions that we kind of collectively developed to kind of as prompts for the conversation, but we'll see how it goes and where it takes us. There'll then be a break for half an hour. People are very welcome to bring drinks in here from the cafe and food in here as well. Then we're very lucky to have Michelle Daley, who's come all the way from London today, who's kind of at the back and giving a wave. It's one of the founding members of loads of things, Disabled Black Lives Matter, Sister Frida, and current director of ALLFIE as well. And Michelle's going to be in conversation with Dennis after the break. There'll then be another half an hour break, and then we've got two spoken word performances from Peter Street and Pauline Omoboye after that. And then the event will end for about 3:30, 4 o'clock. So I'm going to pass you, I think, two little things. So we've got a quiet space available by reception if anyone needs one today. There's just one space for one person. There's also another space upstairs in our coal store, which is accessible via the lifts if people need another space. The most accessible toilet is downstairs in a level using the lift. The toilet in the corner, which is accessible, but only one person went out, is actually broken just this morning, so I apologise for that. But there are toilets upstairs as well, or main gallery too, if people need them. So there's two different ones we can use. And I think that's it. I've said the cafe stuff, so I'm going to pass over to Anis, who's going to do the more fun stuff. And I'm around all day, so if anyone has any questions or wants to talk, myself, my colleague Mark, who's at the back, are here as well. Okay, so come grab us.
Hi everyone, my name's Anis and my pronouns are they and any, and I was one of 4 community curators for the Nothing About Us Without Us exhibition, which you're all welcome to visit between now and 5 o'clock. Does the museum close? So there's some time after. I'm a 36-year-old British South Asian wearing a Garfield t-shirt, blue jeans, red shoes, and in my arms I have Izzy, the intersex red panda, who's also there and has the disabled and intersex flag, which is purple and white, which is also featured in the exhibition. And to my left we have Pam and Tony, who are BSL interpreters for the day. So I'd like to now pass over to Dennis in conversation with Martin Pagel. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Dennis. Quick tech check. Am I in the way of the captions? No, good, good. Hi everyone. Hi Martin.
Hello Dennis.
Hello darling, welcome again, and lovely to see you here. Thank you for coming to chat to us today. I'm looking forward to giving you a good grilling, as I always do. Picking your brains. So yeah, we're going to talk about a few different things, hopefully. We might follow some of these questions, or we might just go off on our own tangent. I'll follow you anywhere you want to go. So, and I mean that truly as an activist as well. So, first of all, Martin, I wanted to ask you, right, about the very beginnings for you of getting involved in politics and stuff. So how did you become an activist in the first place?
Well, first of all, thank you. Looking around, it's great to see old friends. It's greater still to see new friends. You might not know that you're my friends yet, but you don't get out of here without friendship. And seeing new people always cheers me up. I want to thank you all for coming here, because the two most important things that I think have happened for decades has been the establishment of the Disabled People's Archive and this exhibition. It was always a life dream that our history, our knowledge, our experiences, and our friends that we've lost along the way are remembered, and that we learn and continue to learn from the past. So answering, the reason I haven't thanked Dennis is because this is absolutely no different to every visit when I come to Manchester. I meet Dennis, we have a coffee, and she asks me a million questions. The only difference is that this time it's in front of people and I need to behave myself slightly more than occasionally that I do. So going back to the question of how did I get involved? I'll tell you the very first thing that I heard that led to me being involved in the disabled people's movement, and it was, "Oi, you must be Martin. I'm told that you're an angry young man who has completely made a pig's ear of the Access campaign at Manchester University." That was my meeting with Neville Strowger. And it was, I'd been set up. I thought I was meeting Pat, who was the community development worker at the university, and that she was going to take me out and show me Manchester. No, she'd arranged for me to meet her outside of County Hall, as it was at the time, and it was to attend an event called Towards a Coalition. And it was the drive towards what a year later became the coalition itself. And Neville was the greatest recruiter that we ever had. In my case, he knew who I was and he was expecting me, and he came along and, as I say, put me in my place, and then told me if I'd come inside and behave myself and listened for a bit, then I'd come out equipped to actually be an activist and do things properly. But most people didn't get to know Neville by appointment. They were just wandering around Greater Manchester. They could be in a shop, they could be just going down the street, and Nev would just roll up and say to them, "Oi, you, are you a disabled person? And if you are, sign this form and join Manchester Disabled Athletes." And then after 1985, when the coalition was formed, sign this form and join the coalition. That was our outreach work, was effectively Nev wandering around, accosting people. My favourite was, is that a pebble? Is that polio or a pebble in your shoe? That's how we recruited Bernard Leach, who was a teacher at the Polytechnic at the time, and he was just out shopping. That's my introduction to activism, Dennis, was basically, I was one of a handful of students at the time. Access was poor. I was angry. And I met some of the most fantastic people that taught me how to channel that anger and do something positive, and have fun and enjoyment, because that's my abiding memory of the early days. It was fun, it was enjoyable, and we had a riot.
that's so lovely. Thank you for talking us through that. So you were basically accosted by Neville, dragged into it. Well, he spotted you as a troublemaker by the sounds of it.
Well, he'd been told that apparently I had some potential. I mean, I thought I knew everything because I was a cocky young pup. But it was finding people that could be brought together. And the challenge wasn't finding someone that knew everything and had all the answers. It was finding the raw material. And that's pretty much the challenge still today, is finding the potential in people and working together to take that potential to the full. And the full being, and let's be clear, we are here, hopefully, I know I am still, to change the world. Nothing less, nothing more. A world that is fair, just, and equal. And if that isn't why you're here, there's a door there and there's a door there. Because you're wasting your time and you're wasting the time of the people that are here to change the world. Because that's what we set out to do. And we weren't perfect. We didn't get everything right. But if I look back, and there's not many organisations that can say, as a continual, or one organisation continuously over 38 years is still delivering on change. We've now probably the 4th generation of people now involved. That's success. We don't celebrate it enough. We seem to be shy about celebrating. But the work that has gone in to get us to where we are today is phenomenal. This city is completely unrecognisable from the city that I came to in 1983. And I hope in future visits it will continue to change, and it will continue to get better, and it will continue to the stage where to see this many disabled people back in the day would probably have taken me about 4 years, because we weren't visible, we weren't certainly out on the streets, we certainly weren't out shopping, we certainly weren't out in leisure facilities because we couldn't get into them. Or even if we could, we weren't welcome. We were beyond ostracisation. We were people that just weren't recognised at all. And if you go and look at the exhibition, if you haven't already, you'll see some of that, and you'll see some of where we came from, because that's, I think, is also important. Not just where we're going, where we've come from. And there's been some absolutely fantastic people that have got us to where we are.
Yeah, and you're one of them, of course.
No, I'm just an angry young pup that grew up a bit.
Well, you're an angry young pup who's trained up other angry young pups who are now angry middle-aged bitches, apparently, in my case. I'm hoping to bring up the next generation of pups. Is it weird? Is it weird seeing us sort of grow up and go, right, I'll join the committee now then?
Well, I don't accept the premise of growing up. What's that old saying? That growing older is obligatory, growing up is optional. Yeah. So I'm still a teenager. My body isn't, but I still am. I still have that enthusiasm, that drive, that commitment. If my body would follow that, that would be fantastic, but it doesn't. We are what we are and what we make ourselves. And I know about the barriers and the obstacles and the people that stop us from doing things, but the greatest barrier to us achieving is ourselves. We've got to raise our aspirations. We've got to support other people to be positive. We've got to encourage and unleash what I believe is in all of us, which is a drive to contribute to society, to be an equal part of society, and to enjoy ourselves. And that's in all of us. Those of us that are a bit older now, our job is to offer encouragement, support, but I'm not an activist anymore. I'm just a resource.
Thanks for letting us tap your resource, Martin. For some reason, that sounds a little bit saucier than I thought it would. But then it came out, and I'm like, well, it's happening now. So you mentioned just before that there's been massive changes in the time since when you first came to Manchester in the 80s and now. I know it's difficult because there's been a lot, but would you tell us about some of the changes that you think are most important or most important to you?
Well, I think it's what's important to us. If I do slip up in my language, then I apologise. But if you hear me using the word I or me, feel free to slap me. Because it's about us and we. Individually, we achieve next to nothing. Collectively, we achieve enormous things. So let me take you back on a tour around the city. You wouldn't have been able to go around the city in a wheelchair because there were no drop curbs. You wouldn't have been able to get into shops because most of them had steps. You wouldn't have been in employment because employers had absolutely no regard for our abilities, talents and skills and just assumed we were unemployable. I was speaking to Dennis earlier and said, I remember on my 18th birthday going to see the disability resettlement officer, and I was given a form to sign, and then I was given a card in exchange, and that card said basically I would never work throughout my life. I don't recall ever not working since I was 18, but the expectation at the time was that you didn't work. You certainly didn't go to college. You were lucky if you went to mainstream school. You were even luckier still if you were out of an institution and living in your own home. So being able to have your own house, that's a change. Being in a job, that's a change. Being in college and studying, that's a change. Getting on a bus is a bloody big change. Having a tram that we can use, is a change. So from the built environment through to employment, education, social interaction, in just 38 years we have seen enormous change. We are now visible within society. We are contributing to society. We are society. That's the change that I've witnessed. That's the change that we have achieved.
That's awesome. So, would you say activism has changed? So our built environment's changed a lot. Activism presumably changes somewhat over the years. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, we didn't really do much back in the day because it was difficult. I'm being sarcastic because things were always difficult. But when I hear people today tell me how difficult it is to get together and meet people and exchange views, you tried doing it with snail mail. You tried doing it with snail mail where you couldn't even get to the post box to post the bloody letter that you needed to send across the country, having handwritten it 12 times because there wasn't a photocopier. If you were lucky, you had a manual typewriter. And computers, hey, they didn't exist. Sorry, that's not true. There was one in a damn big room down at the university. It was enormous. So we didn't have the tools that were available today. But what we had was a drive and a commitment. And we had telephones. Yeah, I know we've got phones today, but we haven't. We've got micro and mini computers that we can carry around in our pockets. Telephones were things that you plugged in, and if you had the manual dexterity, you could do the dialing, which would normally take about 3 or 4 times because they were incredibly long telephone numbers, and your finger would slip at some point and you had to hang up and start again. And you'd gather in a room where one person would actually do the listening and the talking, and then they'd have to relay the conversation to everyone else that was in the room. And then you would have a conversation and feed it back down the telephone. And I joke not, that's how we organised. We didn't do it in offices and because we didn't have any. Our first office was actually a porter cabin that had been condemned by the council, and they let us have it because it was cheaper to let us have it than to demolish it and clear it out. But we didn't have any of the tools that we had today, but we found a way. We found a way to get together because we needed to get together, because what Martin Pagel thought about the world was irrelevant. What Ken Lum thought about the world was irrelevant. What Cathy Avison thought about the world was irrelevant. What Sue Napolitano thought about the world was irrelevant. What we thought about the world was very relevant. We needed to bounce ideas off each other. We needed to get our ideas together. And we needed to change language. We created a whole new vocabulary. Accessible design, the built environment, independent living, social model of disability. We created all of that. And we created it across the country. So it wasn't just difficult enough getting someone in Manchester to talk to someone in Salford. We were having those same conversations with people in Southampton. We were having those same conversations with people in Glasgow. We were having those same conversations with people in Norwich. The length and breadth of the country. But it was slow. It took forever. It was a nightmare. But it was enjoyable and fun because we were doing things. We were bouncing ideas. And that to me is about activism. It's not about, well, sorry, it is still in part about ego tripping and a bunch of self-glory seeking and self-promoting people that I have nothing still but contempt for. And that's other disabled people, by the way. Some other disabled people. Those that think that they are more important than you, than you, than you, than you, than anyone else in this room. Well, they're not. And it's our job to remind them that they're not and put them in their place. So it was fun, it was enjoyable, it was creative, it was dynamic, and it achieved. And I'll keep coming back to that theme because one thing that I think we are poor at as a community is celebrating success. Yeah, I'll let you into a little secret. Not that big a secret. I'm going to be dead before the World's Fair Just and Equal. And so are all of you. Because sadly, we ain't going to have a revolution in the lifetime. And don't get me wrong, I'd be so happy to be proved wrong. I'd be so happy for you to come up to me in a few years and say, oi, you were so wrong, you pessimist. But we ain't going to have that revolution. We ain't going to see society completely and utterly deconstructed and rebuilt where we are all equal. But we can get some of the way along that journey, and we can lay the foundations for the next group of people to come along. As long as, and this is the challenge to people that I don't yet know, please don't waste your time on reinventing the wheel. Feel free to be critical. Feel free to challenge. Feel free to question whether what we did previously is still relevant today. Some of it is. Some of it isn't. But don't waste your time on reinventing what is already there. The wheel, believe it or not, has actually been made. So let's not put more effort into recreating wheels. We know what a wheel is. We know how to make them. We know they're there. So don't waste your time reinventing history. Learn from it, build on it, make your own mark on it, and drive us forwards. And use fossils like me. I think I've gone beyond being old. Use what we know and have gained as the basis of testing out what you're thinking, what you want to do, what you want to achieve. Ask us, did you consider doing this? Did you consider doing that? Because as I say, you won't find many of us that are so defensive and say, well, actually, we were perfect. We got absolutely everything right. Aren't we so smart and clever? Because we didn't. And those of us that are honest will tell you, we didn't get everything right. We made mistakes. We took risks, some of which worked and some of which didn't. But challenge us on it, engage with us on it, and find your own way. And use that technology positively. But can I add one final warning? I know where my navel is there in my belly. I don't need to sit here all day looking at it. And too many disabled people pass off navel gazing and self-introspection for activism. If you're not achieving something, you're wasting your time. If it's about bigging yourself up, you're wasting our time. And time is precious. And we don't have enough of it. So don't waste it. Use it. Use the tools that we now have. And that's my view of how activism's changed. But please don't ask me the details about technology, because it's magic grey boxes that do magic tricks. And I went to a college of technology. But clearly I did social science, because I didn't understand those magic boxes and the magic that they achieve. But they have liberated us to the extent that they also allow us now to produce Braille. That doesn't mean we have to send things off and wait a week for it to be sent back to us by post, and then we have to mail it out to people. So technology is enormously beneficial, but it's wasted if all we do is use it for introspection and navel gazing. And I'm afraid that I see too many people doing that, wasting the time, wasting their skills, but more importantly, wasting the opportunity that is there now. The platform has been built. We can now drive on from here.
It is, yeah. It's great just thinking about how what we've learned before can help us move forward as well. Obviously, that's why the history exhibition is so important. That's why our conversations are so important, is sort of looking at where we've been to help plan where we're going and get better, because we're not perfect. We're still learning. So just a little,
Can I just
yeah,
pick
go
up on one bit of that, Dennis, which is, but it's also about sharing our knowledge and experiences.
Right.
So, for example, when I said about we'd created all these new ideas and new ways of looking at the world and new ways and new opportunities, we also found solutions that previously had divided us as disabled people. So I'll use a very, very practical example, which is crossing roads. For wheelchair users and mobility impaired people, it's important that we have level access. For visually impaired people, that means you die, because you don't know where the edge of the path is and where the road is, and the next thing you know, you are wearing that bus and not chaining yourself on and doing a Dan demonstration. You're wearing the bus because it's run you over. Now, we were told in the old silo world, where we were all kept in our own little impairment silos, where we didn't work across, so where we were collectively disabled people, we were just known and organised by our silo. We worked together so that visually impaired people and mobility impaired people came up with a solution that gave us crossings that were safe for us all to use. We found that solution. We were told by so many engineers and planners and all the other professionals that there wasn't a solution. So we work together. And that's the other bit that I think is key, is not being individuals as individuals, not being individuals within a silo of our own impairment, but being collective and using that collective knowledge of what do we all have in common? We all want equality. What do we also want? We want independence. There are some barriers that can be removed for me that would create a barrier for you. So rather than saying that's just the way it is, let's get together and say, how do we work together to find the removal of that barrier for all of us. And that's not going to be given to us by any of the professionals and any of the elites. That will only come from us working together. And so, as I say, I never met a visually impaired person until 1985. I was born in 1964. I met loads of other mobility impaired people. I met them in hospital. I met them in the school units that I was in. But we didn't meet. Our services were separate. Our accommodation was separate. Our schools were separate. We broke down those silos and said, yeah, our impairments might be different, but our collective identity of people excluded as a result of those impairments is our strength. And that is where the whole idea of coalition came from. It wasn't a mistake or just picking that word. It was bringing people together. It was all of the individual little single issue campaigns, geographical campaigns, single impairment campaigns, and saying, let's bring them all together. And then let's find out how we can work together to identify the solutions. And when we have that, then the hard work comes, because we're then going to go out and sell it to the people that have the power, have the money, and have the influence. But because we'd gone through that group stage of all coming together to get the solution, we also had the bigger group to go out and then challenge the people that really had the power and the influence to bring about change. And I don't think that's changed. We still don't have enough money. We still don't have enough influence. But I can tell you that disability is one of the biggest industries in the world. It's a billion pound industry. It's just we don't see it. It goes to the engineers and the designers and the producers of enhanced technology. It goes to the professionals that still want to control our lives. It goes to the parents that still want to rip us off and see us nothing as a cash cow, where they take the money that the benefits are supposed to be for our use and our independence, but it's seen by some parents as their income stream. It's seen by, and yeah, I'm not going to apologise this time. It's seen by the parasites, the charities and the organisations that absolutely directly rip us off. They steal money out of our pockets and line their own. They've got slightly better in that they no longer have the same offensive titles as they used to have. But let me give the example of the Spastic Society. The Spastic Society knew that the word spastic was offensive for 2 decades before they changed the name to Scope. And why were they reluctant to change? They were reluctant to change because of all of the bequests and the wills and the bequeathed income that people had left to them as the Spastic Society, and they were worried about losing those millions and millions of pounds if they stopped being so offensive. That's why it took 20 years to change the name to Scope. And then they went one better. They stopped being offensive and they just became downright thieves at that point, and they stole the funding from our organisations in the 1990s. They rebranded themselves as, what is it, Disability Equality Champions? No, you're thieves. You might as well mug me as what you do. You steal our identity. You steal the money that's supposed to be about for our use. You still have chief officers and executives that are non-disabled people that have hundreds of thousands of pounds of salary, and you pontificate on poverty amongst disabled people. Well, bit of a clue. Give up your salary, quit your job, go away, to think about that one.
Think of words that. Trying to think of appropriate language, aren't you? I can
I'm
tell.
trying not to swear for once in my life. And give us that money.
Oh yeah.
Poverty amongst disabled people can be eradicated tomorrow with no new money being involved at all. If we got rid of all of the parasites, if we got rid of all the professionals, if we got all of the people that make a living out of us to go away, politely, and freed up that money for us,
Yeah.
poverty would end tomorrow.
Well, that wiped all my great questions out of the air because
Sorry, Dennis, I
no,
got a bit sidetracked.
no, you didn't. You like answering so much important stuff that I wanted to ask you about individualism, about why we have to work collectively, about and develop policies collectively. It's just it's just amazing. Why though? Can I ask you now?
Yep.
Just because we got to scope, we did get to scope naturally, and I didn't start this, right? You started scope. So while we're talking about scope, sometimes, and this is perhaps one of those reinventing the wheel things, or having to relearn what people already know, right? So we haven't worked historically with scope at the coalition. Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People hasn't historically sat down at the table with scope. So the sort of conversation we might have about different organisations, including scope, amongst those big charities like the RNIB, the RNID, MENCAP, Scope, obviously, and some of the others. Oh, I'm sorry, my favourite, Cheshire Foundation, my favourite. But why shouldn't we sit at the table with Scope? There was a great thing that came up recently where they were going to have loads of different groups working together. You know, like disabled people's organisations, and also in this group would be Scope having their say as well. Why should we maybe not do that? Or would you say we should not do that? Should we sit down at the table with Scope?
I think we should sit down with Scope. I think we should sit down with MENCAP. I think we should sit down with all of them because I want to hear their apology. But that's what we should be sitting down with. If they're not apologising and explaining to us that they fully understand the history and their contribution towards our exclusion, then you're being conned. And you're wasting your time. The starting point now for building allies in my world is simple. You demonstrate what you have learned about how you, your organisation, and the things you represent have contributed to where we as disabled people are today. If that isn't your starting point, you ain't an ally. You might pretend to be friendly, you might pretend to be nice, you might actually be a good person, although I doubt it. Your soul is going to hell, apparently. So, is there any point in challenging them? Well, no. We've challenged them enough. We've explained enough to them. If they still haven't got it, and they don't open their gambit with, we have done all of these horrible things and we have learnt from it, and we from today commit to doing things differently, and we are talking to you about how we do things differently, then don't waste your time because they're lying. Or they are so stupid that they're no use to you anyway. If they don't get it now, they ain't ever going to get it. The people might change, but the values, the views, don't. So, don't waste your time. I mean, you know, it's your lives, do what you like. But don't ask me. I don't ever want to see Scope again in any way, shape or form. But then, to be fair, for nearly 40 years, they haven't wanted to see me. There were a handful of us. The awkward squad would be the nice way of putting it. We made it our mission every year to go to their annual meetings. We made it our mission every year to go and visit their homes, their schools, just so that every year we could renew our badge of getting kicked out and renew the photo opportunity of being removed by big burly security guards. I tell you what, there's nothing quite like having a big sweaty man dragging you out of a building. It was always the highlight of my year. But we took it to them. And I have to share one anecdote, because the one bit that I still hope is to come is the oral history before all of us have gone. And it was a Scope annual conference in Blackpool. And they had invited us to come and talk about self-organisation of disabled people. So this is when we did listen, Dennis, and this is where we did seek to engage with them. Until the microphone was grabbed off me and I was thrown out, to a chorus of people on the front row shouting at me, "We're here for the spastics, not the cripples."
Oh, dear.
The best heckle that I have ever received in my life. Me and Kevin Hyatt, we loved taking things to them. But we knew after the first few meetings that, to be honest, it was for our pleasure that we went along and had the engagement with them. We certainly didn't expect them to achieve anything. We didn't expect any positive outcomes. We expected to be removed. We expected to be threatened with injunctions and all the rest of the stuff. And we loved it. But as I say, make your own minds up. But unless they apologise, unless they take ownership of their history, they ain't ever, ever going to be a positive part of our history.
Yep, I so agree. And I've been thrown out of a few Scope buildings myself as well now. Sometimes I don't want to leave, but that's just because I'm enjoying blocking the doorways so much so no one else can get in. Oh, I do miss Dan protests, but we're going to have other protests. They're coming up. So, Martin, if you were going to give, so we're having our sort of last 5 minutes now, and like we imagine you had only these 5 minutes to talk to us. What is it you want to see us doing now as we move forward? Where would you like us to be moving?
Well, two things I would say is make use of us veterans. My knowledge, and I am consciously using the word "my" at this point, my knowledge comes solely from having worked with some of the most fantastic people that sadly you will never know because they're no longer with us. You can see some of them in the exhibition next door, but the cleverest, the most challenging, the most dynamic, the most creative people that I've loved every single minute I've been around them. Their knowledge resides in people like me. It's in my head, but it's not mine. It's theirs, and it's yours if you want it. So unlike when we were starting out, there were no people of an older generation that we could go to because we were pioneers. People that have that knowledge now come in two forms. People like me, who are people like you, that have got our knowledge collectively, want to and are desperate to share it. That's why I'm here today. I'm a resource to be used. Then there's another type of veteran disabled person who's in it for what they can get out of it. The title, the career, the status, the glory, the elitism. We're no different to anyone else. We have our own nasty people as well. I'm under strict instructions at this point not to name them. But see me afterwards and I'll give you a list, because that's the list when I've got a choice between retiring into an old people's home or settling some scores. My pension plan is prison. And there'll be a few people that won't even get that choice if I get my way. So we have knowledge and experience that we are desperate to share. Users. My other piece of advice: end now the individualism. We got rid of the individual model because it failed. If you as an individual want to compete against 60 other million people in this country to have your voice on a par, good luck. Because I can tell you now, unless you come from the right family, unless you've got the right wealth behind you, you're achieving nought. Your success and your achievement will only come about through collectivism. I know it's a dirty word these days, but let's be clear about it. Everything that we have achieved has been because we achieved it. There's a disease that I want to eradicate. It's the I, me disease. You don't have to go to many meetings before you come across it.
Yeah.
You don't have to engage with many people before you're on the risk of catching it. We, us, us. There's a reason why the title of the exhibition is Nothing About Us Without Us. It doesn't say about me. Well, I'm in it. It says us, and it says we. And if there's one message above all else, we gain more together. Is it going to solve every individual person's problem? No. But it'll lay a foundation, because if we can achieve everything that we can collectively, what you then need to top that up with to meet your own requirements will be a doddle. So I'm not saying don't have any self-regard at all. That's silly. But park up your ego, park up your individual needs, and achieve what we can achieve. Once you've maxed out on what we can achieve collectively, knock yourself out on sorting yourself out on any other additional top-ups you want. And we'll be there cheering you on. But collective identity, the power of unity, the strength that we gain from each other is our only chance of liberation. It's our only chance of equality. And if you doubt it, well, to be honest, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your lives, and you ain't going to achieve it anyway. So take the punt, have the confidence and the trust in each other, and work together to achieve. That is the thing that I wish there were people around that could have told us that 40 years ago. But there weren't. Well, there is now. And it's only nonsense if you don't use it. So I'll end my bit with an offer. It's the offer I make every time I come to things. Yeah, I should say I'm in semi-retirement these days, because my soul is still young, but my head and my body have issues. But I'm a resource. I can, through that magic trickery grey box thing, is it called email? I can be contacted by email. I can be contacted by text. I can occasionally talk to you. You can ring me. But use us as elders, as people that are a resource for you. I'm nothing. I'm comfortable in my skin. I know what I was a part of. I know what I achieved. I know the benefits and the success. And I'm happy. I've done my bit. I've had a fantastic time. The payback for that is I now owe a duty to you to share it. But not just my knowledge, but the knowledge of Ken, Nev, Sue, Kathy, Alison, the greats that built the organisation. I know them all. I worked with them all. They still live within me. And I offer you them through my head. So users, use that knowledge and feel free to draw upon it. It's an offer I make all the time. And the reason I'm here today is because it's been taken up. And I'm absolutely delighted that you have spent this time with me and we've been able to look back in order to go forward. So thank you all for being here and for taking us forwards. And I hope that in the not too distant future, I'll be getting those emails, those texts and those phone calls, asking those questions, challenging some of the things that we did, seeing if there's things that we can do better, and contributing in that way. And on that note, thank you all very much.
Martin, just thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with me, as you always do. Thank you for sharing with all of us all this amazing information. You've got me filling up here.
So one final thing. Next time I meet Dennis for a coffee in Burnage, you're all welcome.
Yeah, just come and join us.
Because this session repeats every time I come up.
Yeah.
So feel free to stay in touch with Dennis and say, when are you next having that coffee? And as I say, it doesn't necessarily need to be someone called Martin Pagel. There are still a few others around. It's just that I lasted longer because I was younger when we started. So there are a number. I mean, I'll not name everyone in the room, but you know, there's people that I can sit here and look at and think, you've been around as long as I have, and they're in this room today as well. So have now everyone's claimed to be younger than they are, but stay in touch with Dennis. Find out when those sessions are happening, and if Dennis and Luke and Steve and the others can all work out, and Rick can all work out how to get me to use that magic box, I can sometimes occasionally work out that Zoom thing, and can do it interactively. But these sessions should happen whenever and wherever possible. And as I say, the one final challenge, if you like, the demand that I will make to complete the picture and make me a very, very happy old man. Find a way to record the oral history.
Yeah, that's.
Find a way of having these sessions recorded and other sessions like it, so that for those of us that haven't got either the finances to afford a computer, still the case of poverty, for those of us that haven't got the ability to use the magic trickery, find a way of capturing it and making sure that it isn't lost. And as I say, it's normally in Tesco's, in Burnage, just round the corner from Dennis's. Come along and armed with questions.
Thank you, Martin. Just thank you so much for everything you did to help build Coalition as one of our founders, as the baby of our founders. And thank you for coming today and sharing with us. And I look forward to asking you a lot more questions. There are a lot more questions yet. Thanks, Martin. I'm just going to hand over to Anis.
Well, we've got a 30-minute break now, but just to summarise, very important about collective action, and you know, I often say that it's not about accolades, fandom, sensationalism, and inspirational porn, and you know, comparing yourselves to people who've got awards and visibility, but it's about coming together and finding common disabling barriers to break them down as a collective. Thank you. Hi everyone, we're ready to start, and I just wanted to remind people that these sessions are being recorded and they will be available on the PHM, People's History Museum YouTube channel, or as some people like to refer, the YouTube. And up next we have my friend Michelle Daley from the Alliance of Inclusive Education and Disabled Black Lives Matter. And just to let you know, we're going to have these as in conversation, but if you do have any questions, if you can get them sent over to the People's History Museum, we will try and get them answered for you. And so I'll hand it over to Michelle and Dennis to continue.
Thank you everyone for giving us a minute to switch over. I would like to, again, like Michael did, welcome the absolutely fabulous Michelle Daley to our stage today. I've been running around all day going, that's my Michelle, you know. Like, she doesn't know you all. She's mine already. She's my friend first, but like, really, that's not how it works. So, Michelle, just thanks so much for coming up today. I've been dying to ask you some questions. I know you've had one of those typical experiences we have. Why is it always when we're speaking at something, but that's that kind of, well, a funny thing happened on the way to the show today. But you've had one of those, haven't you? Do you want to tell us about that first? Give us the download.
Yeah, I think I need to download, don't I? Martin was talking about the boxes and computers. You're going to enjoy this, Martin, because I'll send you an email of the transcript of what happened. So from last night, trying to get a taxi to the hotel, no taxi driver wanted to take me, which is quite typical of our experiences as wheelchair users. I guess they didn't want to get the ramp out, and it wasn't like they were they had a lot of customers lined up to use their services. So you can clearly see how much we are still discriminated just by our visibility and just being who we are. People feeling uncomfortable with our uniqueness and the equipments that we use. So definitely the injustice is continuing. But I think that takes us nicely into our conversation, I guess.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes I feel like chasing these people around when I hear about an experience that's happened to an activist and kind of going, do you know who that was? Like, that was Michelle Daley. You can't refuse her a taxi. So, Michelle, Michael said earlier, you've got kind of quite an impressive list of things that you've been involved in founding. So, as you know, I'm going to talk to you a bit about activism today. But before I ask you about some of the particular groups that you're involved with, I'm going to just ask you if you don't mind coming back to your beginnings with us. Like, how did you become an activist in the first place? How did that happen?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here. And in terms of when people ask me this question, how did I get involved in activism? I think I was born an activist, and I think that just happened because of my own background, my family's experience, and particularly my parents' experience. My parents came to England in the 1950s. Well, first it was my grandparents, and just the oral stories that were shared in the home. I was always around activism conversations, so it wasn't like it was unknown to me. So the resistance and fighting back and kicking back and all that stuff was there. It was live, and I was taught to actually fight back, actually. I may not have had the language, but I was growing up with that. So my parents, I think, unknowingly, was teaching me the ropes. This is a conversation, Sadia at the back, we often talk about that. And she always says, it's your mother that did this. It's your mother. So yeah, and Martin said earlier that he's no longer an activist. I disagree. I don't think we can stop. I don't think we can actually stop. And I think it's in a lot of us. So unknowingly, I didn't know I was doing it. So it was as I got later on, after graduating from uni, and the experience of being in a segregated schooling, the experience of always being denied opportunities, the injustice of who you are, our beautiful uniqueness, really kind of became more, attuned to the languages and how to navigate, and meeting more people like yourself, Dennis, like Sadia, and other people as I moved around. And it was a friend by the name of Jasper Dani who introduced me to the Save People's Movement. And I was like, what's that all about? Right. And actually, it was in the same typical way. We were out. And he said to me, well, I don't think you're going to get a job in IT. That was what I'd graduated at uni from. And I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's not going to happen. There's a local DPO. Go and sign up there. And that's how I got involved in activism in a formal way, in a collective way. Whereas before, it was particularly as an individual, because that's how you first of all tend to start off, through your own experiences. So it would have been about the early 90s when I got involved in collective activism within a disabled people's organisation. However, at the same time, I was involved in within the racial justice space, and then moved into gender justice. But for me, it's all about social justice. So activism, I think it was in my DNA. It was there. It just needed to be shaped in a collective way.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you had quite strong politics in your family. So as well as sort of an awareness of experiences of discrimination, people were talking about it, people were naming it and giving you that language. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the language in the same way we might have used in a movement way, but in terms of being able to resist and having I can't give the language at the moment, knowing when to fight back, knowing when to push back, was there. Definitely, and also what was really key for me is being proud of who I am and feeling beautiful about who I am. So the uniqueness wasn't the issue. It was always told, we are not one, we are a collective. That was how I was raised, but wasn't necessarily involved in a collective movement. Yeah. So it was just, when I came in to the Disabled People's Movement and work with our social justice movement, I was like a kid in a candy shop. It's great to be able to identify with other people who's doing the same thing and who understand your experience. That's just damn exciting. So yeah, that's one great thing about collective activism. It's realizing the importance of coming together. And I think something important about that, and I hope I'm not taking our conversation somewhere different. I grew up knowing quite a lot about, my parents are Jamaican, about Jamaican leaders, Marcus Garvey. Martin spoke about knowing your history. So I knew about knowing my history, knowing about who I was. And Marcus Garvey always speaks about is that a tree with no roots is a tree with no foundation. And for me, it's if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. So it's important that we know those roots, and it's important that we pass on those stories. So I grew up knowing stories of ancestral histories. And when I talk about ancestral histories, I mean ancestral histories of the people and the struggles of who I am and how I got to where I am.
That's just so wonderful, actually. I kind of wish every young disabled person could have that in their life.
I'm not young.
I mean, because you're talking about, sorry, I'm referring to you talking about as a young person in your family kind of growing up with this politics. So, yeah, that's really nice, actually. Just I think a lot of younger disabled people don't have that, the two different things, the little bit of politics and about fighting back, but also feeling that it's okay to be you. That's so important, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Oh, my God, that's so fascinating. I'm so glad you came. I've been so excited about this all day, talking to Martin and Michelle. So you are one of the founders of an amazing organisation called Sisters of Frida. And I wondered if you might tell us a little bit about how that got set up, sort of what led to it, and what kind of group is it?
Yeah, so first I should say, I'm no longer part of Sister of Frida, so it's okay. We can edit out the recording. It's fine. So I was a founder of Sister Frida in so we started in 2010, and it really came around with myself and Eleanor Lisney. We had done a speech at Million Women Rise, which is a collective of women demanding, calling for the end of violence against all women and girls, particularly focused on Black and global majority women. And at the end of that speech, Eleanor said to me, "Michelle, we need to do something." So I said, "Okay, what do we do?" So it's one of those typical things. And then from then, a collective of other disabled women came together, and it must have been about 12. And we met up in a hotel in central London. And then from there, we operated unconstituted, for about 4 years. And then from there, we formalized. And then we played a kick. And so it was myself, Eleanor, and Zara. And I think it's important, whilst we might have instigated it, it would have never happened without the collective of the other women. So it was the other women across the country who done the labor to make things happen. And I think what's also important about when we talk about collective work, sometimes it's people who are at the forefront who may be able to drive it, but we should always remember that there are other women and other activists who are doing the work, whose names may not be heard. So I think when it's always said Michelle's a founder of stuff, it may be I might be I'm particularly is an indication I'm a troublemaker. So, so having that means that you may be the one, you may be instigating and bringing people together, but there's going to be lots of people who's doing lots of work. And I recognize the importance of people's names and work and labor who have come before me, who have learned how to do certain things. And one of the great women for me in our history is Mary Prince, who was a Black disabled woman who came to England, brought to England, through the African enslavement as a free slave. And we don't speak a lot about her. And she done some amazing work, and learning some of how she done her activism, but also learning about Harriet Tubman, how she done her activism. That just thought, always gave me excitement around how you do those undercover activism, and to just do work but not always knowing who you are. Some of the skills I learned from that was just excited. You can hear it in my voice. So
tell us more. Tell us more about these women.
That was what excited me. And then doing that work with Sister Frida was amazing, working with a lot of other women. But going back to with Harriet Tubman was how she was able to set so many people free and cross borders through danger during a time of extreme brutality was just harsh. But also when we talk about Mary Prince, who we don't often speak about, who was born in the 1800s, who was brought to the UK, who was a disabled Black woman, but also at a time when she took on the whole institution to get people free in the Caribbean islands as a disabled woman. That's amazing as well, just her story. So we've done some great stuff as disabled activists, but maybe we don't actually always know when we go deep who we are. And she's another one underground activist for me, as long with Harriet, and she's British as well.
That's just so awesome. I'd love to find out more about her, and so I'll probably talk to you more about this afterwards, if you don't mind. Be like, what's the names? Where do I get good links? Thank you. And also, I think women's organising is really important. It's great to see how Sisters of Frida has kind of grown and flourished into a successful organisation. And so I'm going to ask you next about another thing that you've been involved in that I was so excited when I heard about this one. So you were involved in the setup of, one second, we'll take a step back. You work at Alliance for Inclusive Education, which is a campaigning organisation and it supports families as well, that works around inclusion in education with young people. And you're the boss, basically, aren't you? You are the boss lady here. And in that organisation, you set up a group called Disabled Black Lives Matter, which was just so exciting to hear about. And I would love you to tell us all more about that, if you'd like to.
Yeah, should I also talk a bit about ALLFIE as well?
Yeah, sure.
I think that's important, because I think what's also important about ALLFIE, it was set up by a disabled woman, and a disabled mother, a disabled child. So we can see the power of women in terms of mobilizing and making change. And that's Micheline Mason, one of the founders. And I just thought I'd add that to the bit of the earlier conversation. But the core work and values of ALLFIE is calling for the end of all forms of segregated education. We often hear the word special, and we may talk about language later, but we know that when you use the word special, it softens what we're talking about. And ALLFIE says calling for the end of all forms of segregated education. And I think that's what's really important about our work, because what we know about education is that it reinforces other forms of discrimination and injustice. And that's one of the bases for injustice. And we can see that through history, that when you shut people off from education, you shut people off from employment, you shut people off from having meaningful social networks, you shut people off from where they live, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. And we can see the groups in society who education is denied and devalued and all the other things that go with it. So our work at ALLFIE links into other areas, but however, people tend to disconnect it. So moving on to the other bit about how ALLFIE DBLM was formed. There's some members here, Sadia at the back, who was also one of the co-founders. Anis, who came on later. Go and big yourself up there, Anis, right? And I don't know if there's anyone else. So how DBLM was formed, it really was formed out of we also have to remember the history of it. It came out of the brutal murder of George Floyd. And as Black and global majority disabled folks, definitely, in anger and wanting to share our solidarity with the cause. And it just started really just to make a statement, bringing a collective of 11 of us coming together. And then at the end of doing that statement and doing the video, one of the members said, one of the members said, why don't we do a group? And that was Iola. He said, let's form into a group. It was like, okay, what's that going to look like? And that's history. And that's how we became a group of Black disabled activists. And that wasn't right, Black disabled, not activists, Black disabled lives matter. And again, part of that is how do we grow forward? How do we move forward and move forward and flourish and do other things? So watch this space, basically.
That's so exciting. And obviously, of course, don't forget to let us all know if there's any projects or campaigns that DBLM is doing, to let us know so we can actively support that. Yeah. In fact, I'll ask you a question about that nearer the end. So why, I know this seems like an obvious question, but it isn't always an easy one to answer for people. So why is it important for organisations to include all kinds of disabled people, and now, which we've been trying to do for a while, but now start to take kind of more of an intersectional approach to our work?
It is obvious and it isn't obvious. And I think Martin touched on it earlier in your presentation. We talked about silos. But I think we need to go even deeper than that. I think if we think about Britain as a whole, Britain as a whole went around and colonized the blasted world. And what it done is separated out people. And what it does, it creates the divide and rule and conquer. And I think that's how it's made us operate. And that's how it's operated us with our impairments as well. And that's how you get these trumping of hierarchy. This one's better than this one does this one does that. And there you get the privileges, etc., etc. So if in our campaigns are talking about ending X and moving for this, it's who are we talking about? Is it about a particular group, or is it about everyone? Is it about the I, or is it about the we? Who do we want to be part of that journey? Who do we want to be part of that tomorrow? What walls are we breaking down? And it's not just about walls, it's about also our culture, our attitudes. It's about lots of things. So if we're talking about inclusive education as a right for all, if we're talking about independent living as a right for all, if we're talking about accessing transport as a right for all, if we're talking about the shared environment as a right for all, climate justice as a right for all, we also have to recognize the history that went behind that, who was denied the rights to that. We also have to think about how the tools of ableism play a role in making sure certain folks like us can't access stuff. And then we have to break down who's going to be the most marginalized within those groups. So within the disabled people's movement is about all. So that means anybody, all of us, in our unique selves. No matter what we show up with, how we show up, it means all of us. So when we talk about the social model is looking at the barriers, but intersectionality is looking at barriers, is looking at our identity, is looking at social issues. So we are bringing all of that together to make sure we achieve that goal that we want to move forward for, whatever that goal looks like. And we have to keep dreaming, we have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep pushing. And that means we have to bring other people on that journey. And I think it's also important to recognize it can never be just about names when we're talking about all. It can never just be about words. It has to be about the people that we don't hear, the voices that we don't see. We have to think about people who's locked in institutions. We have to think about how the system right now is making it harder and harder for us to engage in these events, engage in these conversations. And that's why it's important that when we think about the tomorrow, when we think about the now, when we think about the present, that we have to think about the nuances of the discrimination and how that's happening, how different people are being shut out. So yes, I might be the boss of ALLFIE, and actually I hate being a damn boss. I hate the title. I actually hate the title. I remember Joe Whittaker saying to me once, Michelle, bless him, if many of us know, he was a trustee of ALLFIE and just a great mentor for me as I was onboarding in ALLFIE. He used to ask me, how do you learn these skills? He can just said, I think you're one of those people who fell into the role. He goes, yeah, you're definitely not one. Like a director in that way, are you? And I'm like, no, I hate it. Right? I actually hate it. I hate it. But it's okay. It has to be done. I like doing all the activism and being a troublemaker, all that paperwork. And I think when you talk about why it's important to have this, we also have to think about not always bigging up names like me, because my name is none. It's how do we get to names that we don't hear? How do we reach those people in institutions? Because we've got the contact, but the folks in institution, the folks in the community who are being oppressed, and the social workers and the care managers and all those professionals who are dictating how our lives are, is how do we reach those? And that's why we have to practice in a way that is about social justice and looking at the nuances of oppression, the nuances of discrimination, and the nuances of intersectional injustice, and looking at our policies, practices, and approaches.
Oh, Michelle, that's just so awesome. I totally get where you're coming from. And same as Martin, really, about we're not trying to create no heroes here. There's no kings and queens. We don't, and as Anis often talks about, you know, we don't need some of those scabs. It's not you say it more politely than me, but we don't need people that are just here to furnish their own pocket and to tell everyone how great they are.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, we need the more collective activism. At the same time though, sis, it is nice being able to show off about you. I just get that it's uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Because also I do think, like, I'm really proud that you're leading ALLFIE as well, because I know you're a great activist. It's great to see a woman at the head of it still and all of that stuff. And also because you do work intersectionally. And I think for me, it heralds, like, finally getting really at the beginning of this proper, more intersectional time. And because I think there's a bit of a mistake sometimes around what we mean when we talk about working intersectionally as well. There's that kind of feeling that we know we're talking about people with multiple oppressions, which is a phrase that the disabled people's community has used a lot. But having multiple oppressions isn't the same concept as intersectionality. It's a different concept. Intersectionality is about how all these things factor together, isn't it? So, for example, I'm guessing, in fact, this is a question, did DBLM come out of ALLFIE partly because within inclusive education working, there is a massive, massive imbalance about who is most affected, who is in the PRUs, who is getting excluded, and that is an extremely racist as well as a disablist situation. Is that partly why, or was that just...
I think I'm understand your question because I think your question's a bit loaded.
Sorry.
I have to
Oh,
I have to
sorry.
hear that, Daley. It's a bit loaded. Mate.
No, tell me, that's
So,
fine.
yeah, I think what you're asking me is how did DBLM come up, and also you're asking me. I think I answered that at the start, and you're asking me about intersectionality. So let's pick up the bit about the intersectionality bit, which I think is necessary. That we do work in a way that centres intersectionality, because without doing that, we will leave people behind, and we will erase, and we will exclude. And it's about us understanding what it means, and for some it may be difficult. And I think one of the quotes that we can lean on to help us to understand intersectionality is Audre Lorde, who says that none of us live single lives, and none of us have single identities. None of us, no matter who we are, we just don't have single lives, and we just don't have single identities. And by understanding that, it gets us to think about what we do in our practices and approaches. So I spoke earlier about Mary Prince, and I think Mary Prince was a fantastic example about how intersectionality looked like in her life, particularly when she took on the legal system to get the change. She's a black disabled woman who was uneducated and coming up against the legal system, which is a privileged system. So therefore you saw a line of intersectional injustice. We haven't got time to go into that conversation, but what you see from her story and her experience is that how much injustice she had to go through in order to get to the point of independence for people in the Caribbean. But we forget that Caribbean at the time was Britain. And what's interesting about her story was how, when I think about what she'd done around independence, but also around freedom and around liberation, but also about the unity. And when you look at what intersectionality means, it's necessary for our struggles. It's necessary for our campaigns, because we cannot do campaigns without taking an intersectional approach. Martin touched on it when he talked about the design of the road crossings. The road crossing had to be done in a way that made sure it brought on everybody on board, because we know that we've got tactile, we've got level crossing, but also on there, you've got the alternative for people who are deaf and blind. So you've got 3 things in one. So which means we can all use that environment, shared space. However, what we now need to think about is people's attitudes about us. But also within our own community, our attitudes to difference in our own community. And that's why it's important for intersectionality. It's about what we do in our own movements. How do we embrace people in our own movement? How do we connect with people in our own movement? How do we involve with others in our own movement? And intersectionality is not just about us getting into a space, but it's how we welcome, how we love, and how we care, and how we want people to be part of that journey. And it's about breaking down those bits and the differences about us, and how when they come to the center, how do they crash? Or how do we work to make sure they don't crash, but we bring one another together in one love? As Bob Marley speaks about, one love. How do we do that? How do we do that in one love, rather than saying, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to think about that? You know, it's not about that, because then we're going back to ableist practices. We're going back to supremacy practices. So then that takes us nicely into thinking about ALLFIE's practice within segregated education and why it's necessary. Because when we think about segregated education, that also comes from a place of where people are using tools to devalue, but also tools to create a system that keeps society divided. So we do that by looking at the way Ofsted ratings are. Ofsted rates schools as outstanding, good, or successful. That influences parent choice. Yeah? So that's another way of how you keep parents out. We've got the qualification systems of what qualifications are going on, what grades, whether someone's got high grades or low grades. So the examination system is designed to keep people out of the education system. And then you've got postcodes, where we live. And then what we know when we start breaking all this down is there's certain members of society will live in certain areas, and therefore you start seeing segregation being rife in more areas than others. And first we start seeing disabled people who are labelled with complex needs being shipped off wherever. And then you start seeing within that black children being segregated in community areas. But we don't call it segregated, we call it mainstream areas in deprived areas. Mainstream schools in deprived areas. That's also a form of segregation in communities. So it's about how much we want to look at what language is doing and how much we want to look at what the practice are doing. So it's not about us thinking about disabled and that group and that group and that group. It's about what's also happening within our group and how do we align with the other oppressed groups as well. And that's what intersectionality really is making us think about. But also we need to think about our practices, our values, and how we drive to move things forward. And I hope that connects with what DBLM does as well. I hope I do, but yeah. Hope I did. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much. So we've touched on some bits here about, I'm going to ask you a bit more about what Martin earlier probably called the 3 Ps, professionals, parents and parasites. How do you help keep ALLFIE on track with all of, because those are issues that you face working with young people's education quite a lot, I imagine. So how do you help stay on track through that?
Oh dear.
We want your
professionals,
tips.
what do you call it? Professionals, parents and parasites. That's a tough one. And it is a tough one because I think social justice work is not easy. It's hard labor. It's tiring, it's emotional, and it's painful as well. And we've lost many people along the journey where we, through fighting the 3 Ps. And it's not about how do you keep people on track. It's more about how do we embed our values about what we're trying to do. It's about how do we get society to think about our values. And the values are shared values, which is around social justice. By ending all forms of segregated education, we're moving towards the values about nothing about us without us. We are moving towards that. How do we do that is what we are doing. Now, right now, we're doing it. We're coming together, collectively sharing our knowledge. We're doing that because at the end of this meeting, we will be going out and we'll be talking about what we've done. How we do that in ALLFIE, I can talk about, is we do it through campaigning, as you know. We do it through capacity building, and we do it through policy and legal issues. And we also, I can give some more examples, we do it through our youth work as well. So how we do that, we have a magazine called Inclusion Now, where we identify good practices through policy and practice, and we get people to share articles and contribute stuff so that we can change the narrative. We can show examples, because we so often hear inclusion doesn't work, and we know inclusion is deliberately made not to work. It does work, but it's deliberately made not to work through deliberately having a favor for segregated provisions. So it's deliberately done. It's deliberately done to resolve segregation. We know it, the data's there, and I'm not going to go through statistics because one is one too many. We know it's happening. We know that why is it a fight for a child to get an EHCP plan so that they can be supported to be in mainstream school. So we know, why is it that parents are deliberately being influenced that the only way they can get their child educated was in a segregated provision or homeschool their children? So we know there's deliberately things happening. So that's how we do it, keep people on track, is to tell the truth. Talk truth to power. Be radical. Don't be scared. And say it is as it is. So that's we do through our work. And I talked about campaigning. So we do research. Yeah, research can also be a pain in the ass, but sometimes it's needed when we want to make our arguments. We need to do our own, collecting our own data, telling our own story. And one of the researches that we did was to demonstrate, and that was led by Harmony. And Harmony done a piece of research to demonstrate how schools are using accessibility plans to drive disabled children out of mainstream schools. So we was able to use that as a campaigning tool. That has been a great campaign tool. That's an example of another thing of what we do to keep people on track. But also, we're able to mobilize parents. And we know that parents can be a pain in the ass as well, because their voices can be stronger than a disabled child. But that's fine, because there are collective parents who want their children. Actually, there is no parent that really wants their child to be segregated. There is no parent that wants their child to be segregated. It's they don't have any choice. And as Joe Whittaker would say, parents ain't choosing schools. Schools are choosing children. The schools are choosing who they want to enter through their doors. And then going back to the parasites, we're always going to have parasites, but we just need to keep strong at our fight. We just need to be smarter, outdo them. And also, I think as activists and as campaigners, we also need to be careful of how we're being shut down through the way we're being resourced. We're being resourced in ways to stop us from speaking, particularly through contracts with the direct payment services, through social services. We have to be really, really careful what's happening of how disabled people are being resourced, because that's one of the ways in which is stopping us from speaking. And also we need to think about, you say, dealing with the parasites, is how do we mobilize in a way that's, because a lot of people are being controlled by the institution, cutting off care packages. I read an article just a few days ago with a woman whose care package has been stopped. Well, bits of it have been cut, I should say. So therefore, they can't engage in certain activities. So we need to be mindful about there are parasites. And this is done deliberate, because as we become stronger, they push back on different things. That's how we deal with the parasites, is through doing things like this, mobilizing ourselves. But it's always, I think, just going back and remembering that there's a saying, and I learned this through the racial justice space, Ubuntu. Some of you may already know it. I am because of you. So we are a collective. And as a collective is how we come together to make that change, how we share our knowledge as one another to deal with things that may be difficult to deal with. And I think there's definitely, we have to learn from the past. I've learnt my tools from the past. And we definitely have to keep teaching the young people as we go along. But not just young people, there's new people coming into the movement. How do we make sure new people coming into the movement know the history? How do we support that? And I think this is a great space. How do we keep these spaces up? We don't have enough of them. We need more.
I will amen to that, because this space is, sorry to start waffling, but this space has been so precious to us. I'm so glad to have you here with us today, to see the exhibition, to see where we've put the Sisters of Frida banner and other stuff about ALLFIE and different struggles that you know about.
Yep.
So obviously I think we've been really lucky in Manchester that things are, and this is a bit like Martin was saying, how some things have improved and some things have developed. 20 years ago, this museum might not have been quite as accessible as it is now, but it's worked hard to bring people in and to embrace us, and then embrace grassroots activists as well. And because we're being welcomed into a space that understands equality, we're definitely in a better position than we would have been 30, 40 years ago when we were just dreaming about having a exhibition somewhere. You know, and the only exhibitions anywhere were about what professionals are doing, never about what we were doing. So, yeah. So I'm going to just do a last question, because I think this is really important. Are there any things that you're working on at the moment that we can get behind you with and support you to do, or back up, or sign up to, or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So you might be aware, I think you are aware, Dennis, of our campaign, End Torture Against So-Called Care Homes. So that's a collective of ALLFIE, ROFA, which is Reclaiming Our Future Alliance, and Disabled People Against Cuts, DPAC. So 3 of us as a coalition came together collectively to organise and mobilise disabled folks and movements across the country to really say, look, enough. You know, we need to address this outright torture against disabled people and disabled children in care homes. So I'm not sure how much you're aware of the issues. So the Hazley Group ran care homes, and there was a series of criminal offences, I think that's the only way we can describe it, against disabled children. I won't go into too much of the details, but it's graphical, and it brings tears to our eyes, really. It's on our hearts, that care homes are making so much money out of the lives of us. And again, it goes back to what Martin's saying, that we don't make money. It's not us making the money, it's others making the money out of us. And what we learned from this experience of the story is that one child's placement is costing over 250k per year. Now, what could you do with 250k per year? But also the torture the children have been experiencing, and from the staff. And these care homes were rated by Ofsted as outstanding. And CQC. So you can see how many people are involved in one institution, but also how this institution is being supported to make money at the suffering of disabled people. So this is one of the campaigns that we are doing. And so we've been holding a series of discussions about what we need to do, and we will be planning a day of action on the 7th of September. So we would love for you to come to London if it's possible. Hopefully we would be able to stream it. If that's, I'm not sure on all the technical plans at the moment, because there are 3 organisations that are involved in this. And this is a good example of collective campaigning. And this is why it's so important that we drive the message home about the necessity of collectiveness and working together as one to get that change, and to get our voices heard, and our bodies seen, and our minds out there as well. So hopefully this will allow us to come to the streets and be there present and take the streets in the way that we should be. We've been locked down for so long because of the COVID, but now we know we can get out there and do what we need to do. So that's one of the campaigns we're doing, along with other campaigns as well.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Michelle. Where should people go to find out more?
We haven't put stuff out yet, but stuff, you can keep a watch of ALLFIE's website, DPAC's website, and ROFA's website. As details become known, they will be on there, and I'm sure they'll be on Twitter. I think Manchester Coalition Disabled People are part of some of the meetings I've seen.
Yeah, Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People, has joined this group that are meeting and is totally behind these protests, and will be facilitating our members to join in with these when they come up from home, or whether they're joining in person on the street. And I think local Manchester Disabled People Against Cuts will also be promoting this and encouraging our members to come down. So just And again, just I know Martin spoke in particular to anyone new here, but please come and get involved. Don't feel like there's this line between us and you. Like, please come and join in, feel welcomed. There are national and local campaigns going on that you can find out more about and join in with.
I was just going to add, I think, you know, listening to Martin's conversation when he relayed in the past around how difficult it was to mobilize folks. When you think of today, it's something that Sadia and I often speak about. She always says, Michelle, it wasn't like that back in the days. And it's always quite funny when we talk about the history. And I think what's been some of the changes, what have been really helpful now, is having virtual platform, which means that you can get more and more people together and be able to share the information. And I think is how we keep pushing technology to be more accessible for us. Because also we are shut out from digital technology. We are shut out from a lot of these things. And that does exclude us from also campaigning. Because there's a lot of campaigns that are happening, but not all of us can be included in them. And we are discriminated in those ways as well. Yes, it's helped in some ways. There are changes that have happened, and I accept that. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be pushing for those changes. And I know there's some great work. And that isn't saying that people are not pushing, by the way, just in case people say to me at the end. I'm saying it just means that it definitely means that technology is moving so fast. It's moving at a pace that is rapidly fast. And we need to make sure that we're not left behind on a lot of those changes.
Oh, Michelle, just thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Manchester. Welcome to the People's History Museum. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
And you are in it. You are in it. Just thank you for sharing with us your wonderful insights. It's always a privilege to talk to you and to pick your brains, which I know I've done before. You must have related to Martin when Martin said, this is just Dennis grilling me again. It always happens. I can imagine you thinking, hey, that's what happens to me too. So just thank you for sharing that with everyone and for coming all the way up here. And just, I think what's lovely about talking to you and Martin actually is that if we sort of take down the detail a bit and look at the overall picture, we're all saying the same thing, which is come together, fight back. Come together, fight back. Yes, you belong. Come together, fight back. And I think that's wonderful because that's where our future is too, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
Thank you so much, Dennis and Michelle, for the very important point around intersectionality. And when you come to the Nothing About Us Without Us exhibition, we have a whole section called Us. And the strapline for the exhibition is past, present and future. And in the future section, we do have means for people to advertise their local campaigns. And this wasn't a tick box exercise by the People's History Museum. You know, here at PHM, we're committed to getting involved with current campaigns. So as for the 7th of September, we're hoping to have a day of action in Doncaster in the north so that we can show solidarity that things are happening in London and up north. And you can find out more information through the Greater Manchester Coalition, Reclaiming Our Future Alliance website, Disabled People Against the Cuts, and with some support, hopefully build up momentum here at the People's History Museum. As somebody who experienced both special and mainstream education, it's something very close to my heart, and to recognise that here today in the audience, in our steering group, we're disabled people. There are non-disabled allies here as well. We also have other identities, whether we're queer, whether we're global majority, people of colour, etc. Men, women, non-binary, trans people, intersex people. And it's really important that we work collectively and recognise that there are multiple oppressions that we sadly often are always including it in other social justice movements and have to create our own work and labour, but it's getting a lot better because things that impact non-disabled people also impact us, like climate change, even more so and things. So thank you to my friends Michelle and Dennis. We're going to have a 15-minute break because we're a little bit behind schedule, but after the break we're going to have some fun poetry. Thank you so much. I'm now going to introduce Peter, who is a creative writer. I'm going to leave it with some sort of mystery. Creative writer.
Yeah. Hiya. First I'll start off with some poems, but then we'll move through to some of the prose from out of my book. God, don't I look sweet? That's my Irish mum. Red hair with the temper to go with it. Right. Not being me really is about childhood. Being autistic, the problem with me is that I'm not very good at being involved with groups. Today, at one time, I was going when I was totally surrounded. But then, one of the places, bizarrely enough, where I felt comfortable as childhood was in the toilets, the outside toilets at the schools, because nobody went in there. This first poem, is called Not Being Me. And it's for everyone on the autistic spectrum. Thank you. Well, I love you. Childhood nights were dreams of being a sheep. Then up and outside of a morning, a quick check to see if by any chance in the night there had been a change of being, just like all my friends, and not the odd one out. Like afternoon dance lessons, spent hidden in the toilet, out the way, because I couldn't dance the sheep steps. That's why I dreamed of being a sheep, so I could be like everyone else. One of the things that the relatives on my mum's side, they couldn't accept that one of theirs was autistic and also combined with epilepsy. So they used to give me an hard time. This next one is called Sheep Inheritance. I am a sheep. That's what the family call me, a black one. I've tried painting myself a colour they want me to be, gone through all the rainbow, but each one just seemed to slide off, like it's not meant, not suited. Worse still, I've dripped all over their best carpets, stained, for everyone to see, talk about, while they chew and swig down a bit more bigotry. Oh, thank you. So I'm going through the various books. These are a bit lighter than the ones what's going to come in a bit. I've been a full-time writer for about 30 years, and I get commissioned to go and write about various countries. And one of the countries that I loved was Iceland. But what made it special for me was the Hallgríms Church in Reykjavik. That church, from where I'm standing here, bottom of the hill, between green and yellow houses, south side of Reykjavik, I'm sure is the spaceship Miss Clarkson let me draw in her 1959 math class, while other kids were working, busy on fractions. It has a staircase on the outside, like the one I pretended to climb, sit, close my eyes, and wait for the countdown. Right. One of the things that I like being alone. I've never been lonely. I've always been alone, but I've never been lonely. And I've always been sort of slightly different to most people. But I used to work for the BBC, and I was poet in residence there for Greater Manchester Radio. And I've been there about 3 years. And then the war started in the Balkans. Now, I've always believed that we who are disabled, regardless of what disability or impairment you want to call it, we can do the extremes. You know, it's not just about us all sort of sitting around drinking tea or boozing or whatever. We can get out there. A local newspaper were calling for visitors to outlaw the biggest ever humanitarian aid convoy. An effort organised by the police and fire brigades of England to mobilise dozens of HMV vans, all fully equipped fire engines gifted by the East Midlands Fire Brigade, going to a Croatian village called Lipik, which had been bombed out of all recognition. I invited 2 police officers into the Greater Manchester studios where I was poet in residence. Live on air, Sergeant John explained they had been taking desperately needed aid to war-torn Croatia, expressed concern for single mothers with young children who had little chance of seeing their birth fathers, even less of finding somewhere safe and permanent to live. He stressed he needed volunteers to upload into the many wagons. This is just me, this. My mouth gave no warning to my brain when it suddenly said, "Can I get a lift?" There was short, stunned silence before he responded, "We're leaving 6 minutes, 6 weeks. Can you be ready?" In my naivety, I thought for those 6 weeks, I could learn Kung Fu. And I could be the martial artist which nobody could take shit out of. Well, kind of. I'll be ready. My wife, Sandra, wasn't immediately on board. "What about your epilepsy? What happens if you will?" Trying to convince her. There'd be medics and nurses didn't wash. Disabled people come back from a war, she said. They don't go to a war. You can't cope with the Hoover. Never mind the sounds of war. You get lost everywhere you go. And who'll sort your tablets? I don't know whether anybody else is the same, but I have no idea about tablets and what tablets to take and when to take them. And so she got me one of them plastic. Does anybody know what I mean? A plastic thing with all my tablets in. I don't even know now. We've been together now 55 years. And I still don't bloody know which tablets go in which container. You know, and anyway. I'll get a drink. So every so often, got to break into the boot to tell you about maybe other things. 17 years without booze, water. It really, oh no, it's boring. Really pisses me off. Anyway, that's another story altogether. It was 6 weeks. Silent meals. Oh, we're talking, so you're sitting facing each other, right? And I'm trying to I do my best. Concentration, trying to make a discussion. It won't work. Sandra fastened Harry. Oh, I love Harry. Harry is my teddy bear. And I've had him since I was about 14. So he usually goes everywhere I go, especially if I'm going abroad. Sandra fastened Harry, my 6-inch teddy bear, to the straps of my rucksack, tears welling. It was then I realised I had hurt her. No, she said, sensing my hesitation, It's too late. You can't back out now. Oh, when you think of it, going to somewhere like a war zone, it's really good for the bowels. All my words were bunched together in a big ball, stinging my throat, too tight to escape. My rucksack leapt onto my back, and together we pushed our way through the front door. Inside the taxi, I forced myself to look at the front window. She wasn't there. I tried the bedroom window. No sign. I waved to our house. You've got to wave. When you're going somewhere like that, you've got to wave, regardless of who it is or what it is. I waved to our house, and that was it. I was on my way, watching the white cliffs of Dover slid away from us. There was a strange sense of anticipation. I couldn't quite understand. On the ferry, I was already being called for wandering off from the main party of officers, medics and volunteers. When the ferry swayed, I swear I saw handguns under the jackets of some men in ordinary clothes. We were soon in Europe. Our first resting was on the autobahns in Germany. I was okay until my smells came back and the stench of something between urine and burnt coffee smacked my nose. I don't know whether anybody else who's on the spectrum gets smells, invisible smells. And I also get taste. I get yellow and green taste. And oh, our dog a few weeks ago, I was stressed out and it was barking. And I am sure, and I said to Sandra, it's barking brown colours. How can that be? You understand? Where was I? No. Yeah. My smells coffee smacked my nose. It didn't seem to be affecting others. Everyone sat on the grass 100 yards from the convoy in their groups, talking, killing their fags, but not showing any emotion, fear, whatever. I had the sudden urge to get away. The realisation had hit me more than any other moment in my life. I wasn't one of the herd. I was me. And that, for me then, in that moment, realising I was me, was massively important. A red-haired woman came over to chat. She was friendly, asking where I was from and who I was with. I boasted about being a poet. She talked Ed Hughes. I talked Charles Causley. It was okay while I was with her, but half a dozen people, friends of hers, came over. That's when I started feeling full up of people. We're on the Slovenian and Croatian border. Well, I just wish I'd have took notice of Sandra. In the far distance, artillery was pounding poor souls and their surroundings. I stood there in the middle of 200 people as we all watched in silence. My body and I felt strange, deeper than an ordinary tingle, turning into a shudder with a tank full of fright thrown in for good measure. After some rations were finished off and fags killed, we were back on the road. Our base camp for the next few days in the huge grounds of International Hotel just outside Zagreb. Among the refugees was a mother, thinner than thin, no breast, holding a small child while pushing a battered pram with different size wheels and a bag full of pig swill swinging from her handlebars. Some of the refugees were literally dying on their feet. My mind flashed back to 1948 and my mum, a single mother, Irish, kicked out of her neighbourhood just because she was Irish and pregnant in 1948. One of the men from the fair began shouting at me for giving my water and sterilising tablets to a mother lying on the ground. She was on her way out. You're putting us all at risk. You're going to get hold of me. When he leant and added, think before you do anything. If you're unsure, ask. He then disappeared into the crowd. So I'll just read a couple of poems from that particular time when I was over there. Sometimes they get. How can you tell when you're reading poetry from such a time? How can it be okay for people listening? There's only two. I'll leave it at that. Bomb damage. And there was this nurse. I can't believe this nurse. Nurses are wild. She was doing a paper for Oxford Uni on children suffering in a war zone. And she wanted to go into the children's hospital in Zagreb. Oh, shit. Bomb damage. There'd been an attack in Karlovac about 20 miles away. And they were bringing the people in then, what had been it. Something was itching my eyes to stare over at the machines. Only I seemed to hear the bleeping, yet my whole family was standing there, and everyone who had ever lived, the whole universe even, all screaming not to look. Yet the bleeping seemed to bounce off every childhood picture and get well card in that Zagreb hospital, like a ball to my feet. Then I made my mistake and looked at a face, a kind of no face with holes, eyes, nose, mouth, legs missing from the knees down, still stuck to all those bits of shrapnel somewhere which banged her life apart. A little girl bandaged, in mummy, almost pretty. Some nurse had taken an age getting each lap perfect, so proud that when we look, we might still see a person, someone whole. Last one, and then we'll if there's any questions about it, do please. And I can find the one about the student. This was an amazing young man. I tried to bring him back to England with us, but I wasn't allowed to do for all sorts of political reasons and all the shit like that. He'd left his home to go and see a friend. It's simply called Zagreb Camp. Wagons rock, jerk, 2 lines of potholes, a foot deep in a cinder path where children walk barefoot. It's a ride down into something I don't understand. A dog shelter where at least 100 families live and beg out their hands and cough loud barking coughs. Naked kids swapping boredom for disease under a tap that's splashing cold silver into mud pies. Our interpreter, an English lit student, his family wiped out, is talking of Shelley in a wasteland such as Eliot never saw. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask me something.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I just wanted to, before I introduce our next poet, to plug the fact that the disabled arts have been really important to our movement and what you will see in the exhibition. And to this day, a big shout out to Disabled Arts Online and how important the arts are to disabled people in terms of tools for campaigning, but also showing that the importance of disabled artists and creatives and how we can use other forms to campaign and share our stories. So up next we have Pauline. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. I can't believe it. I'm here. I'm facing the crowd. I'm nervous as hell and I'm reading out loud. I've sat on my poetry. I'd hidden it away. Then Linda rang me. Now what could I say? Of course I'll do it. I'll stand and recite. It might not be funny, it might even be shy, but I'm a poet with a message. Why not shout it out loud and stand on a stage addressing the crowd? I'm a poet and I love it. And when I have the time, I sit on the loo and I scribble out rhyme. It's fantastic, it's rewarding, it's what I do best. So I'm here to perform and outshine the rest. Thank you. Can you tell me when you look at me? Can you tell me what you see? Can you see past my crutches and my disability? Do you notice I wear hearing aids? No, it doesn't mean I'm missing out. It doesn't mean my hearing loss gives you the right to shout. I stand here a bit shaky, but I revel in my glory. You don't expect me to be bubbly or to recite my story. Some ignorance is still clear to see. So out comes the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't look and paint a picture full of woe. I'm witty. Don't show your ignorance, thinking our lives need pity. My hidden disability is not facing you or on show. This stigma many of us live with and the feelings we know. Because yes, we have our limitations, just the way you have them too. It doesn't mean we're just a number to be dismissed. You know that, don't you? The dictionary describes disability in a phrase all fine and dandy. It's what people use because it's there and ignorance is handy. So I've taken my place in history, raised my voice, stood up to so much more. So I'll tell you, all of this, our life is worth living for. Thank you. It isn't just a coincidence. Take my word for it, it's a fact. This is my actual colour. I am naturally black. And my hair has more than a kink in it. My eyes are meant to be brown. And my lips, my most prominent feature, are the most well-spoken lips around. And I know that my hips are distinctive and my legs are strong and they're firm, but it's my heritage that holds most important, and it's that fact some people should learn. We are what we are, there's no denying, and we see what we see, and that's no lie. And if some people misunderstand me, it's because our culture they cannot deny. Now some say they hate all the darkies and then order their sunbeds in bulk. But when their skins are wrinkly and patchy, it's at us they look and then sulk. So I'll tell you, it's with feelings and a great honour. I'll always stand up and I'll say, I'm Jamaican, it's a fact, and I'm happy, and I'm special in a unique kind of way. Thank you. I cope. 4 kids, a home, I cope. Electric bill, gas bill, water rates, I cope. Buy new shoes, need a new coat, school trip to France, I think I cope. Then there's the grocery bills, headache pills, council tax. Yes, I cope. Feed the goldfish, take the dog for a walk, entertain friends, hoover, cook, polish, mop. I know I cope. Be doctor, be nurse, teacher, psychologist, referee, father, mother, peacemaker, dictator, counsellor, listener and ignorer, judge and blooming jury, and you have the cheek to call us the weaker sex. Gee whiz, I definitely cope. Thank you. Why is it when you're rushing and you want to get home, you get the wonky supermarket trolley with a mind of its own? You look for the ketchup where only yesterday it was piled in a corner with a fresh tomato display. To find it's been removed to make your shopping even longer, only to be replaced with a copy of Jane Fonda. So I take it in your stride and you head for the freezers, where 3-for-1s are displayed to please us. And you know that the offer is only a con. So why is it I buy 3 when I only need 1? Then I see the bread that has been reduced with tomorrow's date. So I pick up 2 before it's too late, before that shopper, you know the kind, who's picking up the bargains you leave behind. Then over to the dairy, a slice of blue cheese. The smellier the better, the pong is to please. Then out in the distance, a screech can be heard. It's that kid from our street who usually utters no words. She's flapping her arms and her mouth open wide. The annoyance of her mother refused to hide. She's having those sweets by the till. They're out there on show. They're there for children, every mother should know. Then I stand in a checkout in a line of 10, wondering when will it be my turn, when? The cashier announces with a smirk and a smile that her till is now closing and points to the aisle-long queue for me to join. And I feel like flipping her like a 10p coin. But I grin and I bear it and I wait my turn. I pray to the Lord that I will learn. Then bumping my trolley into beast and child, I realise what I come for is still on the aisle. Thank you. I miss my mother. This is called the 24th of December, 1956. She came to this land in 56. She sailed the ships for a week, left her homeland and her family, for riches she did seek, followed her husband to a country for a future she could not predict. In a land of milk and honey, she was made to suffer it. She came with a tiny baby, 6 weeks old, in her arms, to a land so cold and lonely, nothing to protect her from all harm, to a house with strangers, a room fit for a pig, but she made a home in this place to raise her kid. And like all the wives before her, she soon found a factory job, set out at the crack of dawn, with 15 others in a minibus, they would travel till morn. The conditions, they were treacherous, and although she did despair, she came to make some money, just enough to pay the fare. No money to bring him on the boat, and every time she mentioned his name, it brought a lump to her throat. She came to fend for her family, left behind in that beautiful land, where the sun shone and reflected its beams amongst the sand, where the sea so blue it shimmered and rippled laughter in its depth. She came and barely whispered, but she often wept. Many a tear she shed in silence, and every 2 years she bore a child. She cooked, she cleaned, she polished, worked all the hours God sent, but hard work and perseverance paid off in the end. She came, she saw, she conquered. She's my mother and my best friend. When I say I write about everything, I do. I write about everything. And this next poem is called Play With Me. No reward in the boring task of ironing. No pleasure though I seek, it's hard to find. As I place my best trousers all lovingly on the board, reminiscence in mind. As I spy the clothes label from Etam, I remember the day that I bought the purple trousers, my favourite colour. Among the sale items I sought, I noticed the perfume still lingers, and the steam from the iron does hiss, and the stain from the curry made in Rusholme. My God, was I really that pissed? I remember as the Lenore scent does linger, that comfort is what I like best, and the rain that taps on the window are singing a song with the rest. I listen to the music in the background. I notice as the iron starts to sway, and the flex takes my hand and asks nicely, let's dance, let's iron, let's play. Thank you. Three black youths, one the owner of a car, followed by police. They won't get far, because although quite innocent and still not charged, the street is a courtroom, the judge is the sarge. I was a witness. I naturally shook, my mind in turmoil, my body deep in shock. I was a witness. I naturally shook, but all I could do was stand and look. Total provocation is what I saw, vicious manhandling and plenty more, shouting abuse, unnecessary force, police against black, naturally of course. Innocent bystanders shouting disgust, male onlookers joining the fuss. All quite reluctant, we view the situation. Everybody anxious, we shake with desperation. I was a witness. I tell no lies. Seeing is believing. I heard the cries. I saw the young policeman, handcuff in hand, beating the head of an innocent man. I heard the yell. I could almost feel the pain as the weapon was lowered again and again. I was a witness I was. I saw the injustice take part in the mosque. I saw the youths bundled in the van, dragged down the street like dogs, not man. The sorrow I feel, the hurt so real, but only a witness. What am I to do but tell you the story so sad and true? Thank you. I'm one of the lucky ones. I've got 4 beautiful children, but somebody was talking about the area in which you live a while ago, and this is my experience for my son. He only has to put 1 foot outside, as natural as can be, going about his private business, just some mates he wants to see, when just around the corner, in wait and ready to pounce, it's a local unfriendly policeman, quite eager to announce, "Come on now, lad, where are you going? Give us your name, what's your address? I'm only stopping you to protect you before you get yourself in a mess. It's obvious you're looking for trouble. I can tell by the colour of your skin and the clothes that you're wearing. You obviously don't fit in. You're one of the local troublemakers. Just wipe that smirk right off your face. I'll show you my authority, put you right back in your place. I can make your life a misery, call my mates, put you inside. Now stand up, pay attention, I'll ensure you lose your pride. I'll make your life a misery. It's not to me you've done nothing wrong. I couldn't give a monkey's, oops, a Freudian slip of the tongue. I know your kind look for trouble. It's a noticed statistical fact. It's proven it's because your colour skin is black. Oh, you don't seem to have a record. I've just radioed to base. It's obvious we've not had a chance to put you back in your place. I'll lie in waiting, just put 1 foot out of line, and I'll make sure that I get you for every relevant local crime. It's really quite a pity. I'll just have to let you go. Not even any back chat, the code of conduct you must know. But watch your back. You know I'm looking, and least of all when you suspect. I'll be waiting round the corner with my nigger fishing net. Thank you. I write poetry for children as well. This was one written for my eldest son when he was about 10. And it's called Black and Beautiful. Mummy, can you tell me something true? Is there something special about me and you? Or are we like Martians who come from space? Why do people stare at me in disgrace? My hair is combed, my clothes are smart, my teeth are sparkling white. My shoes, they shine, the school bag's mine, and my trousers are not too tight. So, Mummy, can you tell me something? Can I ask you true? Is there something special about me and you? And I said, son, listen carefully. You're perfect and you're bright. The only thing that you don't have is the colour of skin that's white. That's why sometimes I think you're different, but the facts are clear and true. Being black is beautiful, like perfect little you. This is my final poem, and it's called The Whole of Me. Part of me lived while part of me died. Part of me screamed while part of me cried. Part of me strong while part of me weak. Part of me yelling, the other scared to speak. Part of me here, the other part there. Part of me strong while part lived in fear. Part of me healed while part of me bled, and part of me lived while part of me dead. Part of me present while part of me doped. Part of me wishing, the other part hoped. Part cared for my children while buried inside the hatred and anger, the search for my pride. Part of me willing, the other part able. Then all of me threw the bad cards on the table. And finally solid, and all my tears shed, I banished the nightmares, I hold up my head to sing out the words of my favourite song. There's something inside so strong. And by looking within, just see what I found. The best of me brilliant, the whole of me sound. Part of me wicked, the whole of me wow. I'm Pauline, I'm sexy, just look at me now. Thank you. Thank you. You have them for me. Yes, I've got some information at the back.
Hi there, everyone. It's now 4 o'clock. The museum is open for another hour. Me and Izzy, the insect red panda, will be in the exhibition space. Nothing about us without us. A lot of us would love to live there, but sadly can't. I'd like to thank Dennis Queen, who's not here, had to leave for London to go pay respects to Linda Laurie, who passed away not long ago, and there was a lot of names mentioned today, and some of the topics may have been quite sensitive and touching. There is PHM staff and peers around if anybody wants to come and have a free hug or is feeling moved by today. I'd like to thank the moderately attractive BSL interpreters, Tony and Pam, and our tech person Alex over to my left. A big thank you to Michael and Mark, the staff at PHM, and to all the stall holders who are around the room, and most of all, thanks to you, the audience, for coming, and have a safe journey home. And if you're new to Manchester, there's a lovely place called Honest Burger that I'm probably going to go to, and you're more than welcome to tag along if you need some company. I think this event has been recorded and will be available on the PHM YouTube channel, and we put the closed captioning on because we're very committed to access. I would like to let you know that we will be having a closing event of the exhibition sometime in October. The exhibition closes on the 16th of October. And thank you to Pauline, and just a constant reminder that we have multiple identities and how we can't possibly tackle disableism without tackling colonialism and racism and fascism, and how racial profiling and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and other religious intolerance, and how all these kinds of things like sexism, misogyny and other social injustices that we face, we need to be tackling them. And one final thing, the 14th of July marks Day of Memory, which marks the birthday of a South Asian young lady that had her life taken away from her in the name of so-called honour, and an amazing organisation called Karma Nirvana in Lead that challenges the honour-based system, which impacts not only South Asian people but people from Jewish backgrounds and the Roma community, and it's something that's impacted me and my siblings. So I'm just raising awareness about that, and if the PHM media channels are open, we will continue to mark important dates like that. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.